This will be for the Khan Academy exercise, differentiate quotients. All right, so for this exercise, you need the quotient rule. That is when you are taking the derivative of something divided by something. Let's say u is in the numerator and v is in the denominator. The derivative is going to be vu prime minus uv prime over v squared. Okay, the way I remember it in my mind, I know this is pretty informal here, but I remember bottom times the derivative of the top minus the top times the derivative of the bottom all over the bottom squared. Okay, when I say bottom times the derivative of the top, that's going to be v times the derivative of u. That's right there. Minus top times the derivative of the bottom. So it's minus u times the derivative of v. That's right there. And that whole thing is over the bottom squared. That's the denominator squared. Okay, you can also write it in terms of functions f and g. All right, but you get the idea. It's the same thing. It's a little bit more abbreviated when you write it in terms of v and u. All right, so here we have our main function g of x, and they want us to find the derivative, g prime of x. All right, so let's see if we can apply the formula here. All right, so we said a minute ago for the derivative. All right, we'll let the top or numerator be the u, and we'll let the bottom be the v. Okay, and we said before, it's going to be the bottom times the derivative of the top minus the top times the derivative of the bottom all over the bottom squared. All right. Now you can do this as you go along, but I'm going to do these off to the side. Okay, if u is the cosine of x, what's the derivative of u? Well, we said in another exercise, the derivative of the cosine of x is basically the negative sine. Okay, and v is going to be the sine of x. And we said in another exercise, the derivative of the sine is the cosine. All right, so now we have everything we need for the quotient rule. All right, so let's work this out here. V is going to be the sine of x. U prime is going to be the negative sine of x. Minus sine. U is going to be the cosine of x. V prime is going to be the cosine of x. And that is all divided by v squared, which is going to be sine squared of x. Okay, let's see if we can clean this up. Sine times negative sine is going to be negative sine squared. And cosine times cosine is cosine squared, but it's minus. And that whole thing is divided by sine squared of x. Now, if you remember one of the trig identities, see if I can fit it down here on the bottom. One of the main trig identities, I think it's called the Pythagorean identity. If you recall, sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x equals 1. All right. If we factored a negative out of this, we would just have the two positives left over, and that would equal 1. Okay, so let's do that. Out of these two, we can factor out a negative sign, and it's going to be sine squared plus cosine squared. Sine squared of x plus cosine squared of x. And that's over sine squared of x. All right, but we said right here, sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. Sine squared plus cosine squared right here, we can cancel that out and write 1. So it's negative 1 over sine squared of x. All right, hopefully that's one of the answers. I cannot see it being in a simpler form than that right there. That's about as simple as it gets. All right, negative 1 over sine squared. And we got it. Answer A right here. Negative 1 over sine squared. All right, so once again, we are finding the derivative. Okay, so we have f of x. We are looking to find f prime of x. All right, the numerator is going to be our u, and the denominator is going to be our v. So we said quotient rule, bottom times the derivative of the top. So that's v times u prime, minus the top times the derivative of the bottom, u times v prime, all over the bottom squared. All right, so off in the margin here, u equals the cosine of x. And the derivative of the cosine is the negative sign. V equals x. And the derivative of x is just 1. All right, in case you didn't see it, if you use the power rule, this is x to the 1. You move the 1 out front, all right, and this becomes x to the 0, but x to the 0 is just 1, so that's why it's just 1. You just have the 1 left over. All right, and now we can apply what we have here. All right, and we made our little table, and here we go. V is going to be x. U prime is going to be negative sine of x. Minus u. So minus u, which is minus cosine of x. V prime is just 1. And that's over v squared, or x squared. All right, let's see. X times negative sine of x, not much we can do. It's just negative x sine of x. And this times 1 does nothing, so it's just minus cosine of x. And that's all over x squared. Can't think of much else you could do here. So I'm going to leave it like that. If it's not multiple choice, I'm almost positive they have to take it just like that. All right, so if it's not multiple choice, we're good. All right, I use parentheses on the numerator, negative x sine of x minus cosine of x. I use parentheses, then I just hit slash and typed x squared. That should be it. All right, one more. We have g of x. We're going to find g prime of x, the derivative. All right, we'll let the top or numerator be the u. And we'll let the bottom denominator equal v. The derivative is going to be bottom times the derivative of the top minus top times the derivative of the bottom, all over the bottom squared. Okay, the u is sine of x. And we know the derivative of the sine is the cosine. The v is e to the x. And we know from a previous exercise the derivative of e to the x is just e to the x. So v is e to the x. U prime is cosine of x minus u is sine of x. V prime is e to the x. And that is all divided by v squared, so that's going to be e to the x squared. All right, both of these terms in the numerator are times e to the x, so I can factor out e to the x. And we're just left with cosine minus sine. Cosine x minus sine of x. If you want to double check distribute, e to the x times cosine of x is right there. Minus sine is there. E to the x times sine of x is right there. And the whole thing is divided by e to the x squared. When you have something with an exponent raised to another exponent, you just multiply the exponents. So that's e to the 2x. All right, and now we can cancel e to the x divided by e to the 2x. There's one of them here and there's two of them here. So cancel this one and just cancel one of them here. And you're left with e to the x. So you can rewrite that, but that should be your final answer right there. Cosine minus sine divided by e to the x. All right, because this one canceled and one out of two of them canceled here. We had one left over. All right, so that should be it. Let me see if I can find that. Cosine minus sine over e to the x. Yes, that is exactly what we have. There you go.